Hello everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. I've participated in NIS conferences, but as a master's student when I was in Southampton. So it's very nice to actually present my research here. Can you hear me well? Is the microphone? Yeah, okay. I'm a maritime archaeologist and currently a postdoctoral researcher in environmental humanities at the University of Hull in a very interdisciplinary department, which is the Energy and Environment Institute. Today, I'm going to talk to you about a new project that we have. It started in June of 2024. It's called Community Waterscapes, and we try to uncover with various methodologies that I will explain in a second, the tangible and intangible heritage of watery landscapes through community engagement in the city of Hull. The project started as an idea from the end of a previous project that the department had before I joined the university. The project was called Risky Cities, and it looked basically at historical flooding through a research of historical archives and documents, and they engaged with the communities in order to create some art-based environmental and climate awareness. Through this project, my colleagues started realizing that there's a lot of space for further community engagement. And also people knew quite a lot about the watery environments. So once I joined the university, and because the archaeologist and heritage specialist in the department, we decided to try to do a proper heritage project. But as our department focuses on climate change and environmental change, we wanted to use heritage as a way to understand and record people's relationship with the water throughout time. So that's how the Community Waterscapes project was created. And as you can see, it's not just me that I'm here today. It's a big team. And we have been also partnering with the Hull Maritime Museum and the Living with Water Partnerships, which is basically part of the Hull City Council and Yorkshire Water have created this partnership to inform people mostly about flooding and needs that need to be done to avoid various problems and challenges that flooding can bring in the city. So today, I'm going to start with a very brief introduction to Hull's water histories. Some of you might be aware of all the things I'm going to talk about, but some others might not, so I'm just going to start with that. And then I'm going to explain the aims and the methodology that we have been using and why we're doing this. And then I'm going to present you some of the preliminary results and the next steps that we have. And I need to note here, though, that the project is halfway through. So we have processed some of the data, but there's a lot more to be done. So what you'll see today is not the final product. So Hull's history has been very much shaped by water. If we look at its first origins as a medieval settlement in the 12th century called Wyke, we can understand that people had already started utilizing the river systems, the River Hull coming from the north to the south, and the River Humber, and mostly like the Humber estuary coming from the west to east. But the city of Hull, the Kingston-Upon-Hull, was not established in its current spot until a very dramatic change of the course of the River Hull happened at some point in the 13th century. And a lot of historical documents attribute that to some dramatic floods that took place. But also we have some references about various canalizations that happened higher up in the Hull, which probably contributed to that dramatic change in the course of the river. So, as you can see in the map over here, the whole city was built at the cross-section where the two rivers basically meet. And that is because the city was built with a maritime perspective. So for over 700 years, Hull, which is Yorkshire's maritime city, has been a port of central importance for transport, fishing, trade, and various types of exchange. And we have historically connections of Hull with various ports of the Hanseatic League, and we see it in the archaeological record of the city very frequently. But later on, also, we have the fishing and whaling industry going up to the Arctic. So a lot of people and families who have lived in Hull for many generations have knowledge for other maritime spaces beyond the North Sea as well. But this sort of unique connection that the Humber estuary offered, the connection with the North Sea, but also all of the systems of central and northern England, brought a few also risks. And one thing to note, even though it was mentioned yesterday quite a lot, we know about the importance of that Humber estuary also in prehistory, because we have the Bronze Age ferry boats, which are considered the oldest watercraft in Europe, and also we have the Iron Age Hasholm logboat that was found in the 80s, and again, it's quite a unique find. So we know that people have been using this estuary for various maritime activities for a very long time. As I said, the position of the city was meant to utilize the two rivers. So we have, I'm over here. So we have the River Hull over here and the River Humber. And as you can see, we have the port, basically the old harbor, being established within the River Hull because it was very protected. And as you can see in that map from the 17th century, there's also a wall protecting the east bank of the river. So all of the ships in there were very, very well protected. And by the time of the 19th century, we don't just have this old harbor, which is the letter A in the River Humber. We have the Victoria Dock at the east, which was basically an extension of some of the positions of the old harbor. We have higher up and west the Queen's Dock that then connected with the Prince's Dock, and then the Humber Dock at the end. And with letters E and G, you can see also two more docks, the railway dock and the Albert's dock, and we have further west another one, the St. Andrew's dock. So as you can see, the whole city was built for maritime activities, and it was shaped very much by them. And we see that in various pieces of art that tell stories about Hull. You see the depiction of the harbor and the Humber dock in the first two paintings on the left. And on the right, you see a scene from the Arctic. And this is what I mentioned before with the whaling and fishing industry. A lot of people from Hull were traveling for months at sea, and they were actually aiming and going at the Arctic and Greenland to fish whales and later on salmon and other types of cod and other types of fish. But this sort of maritime activity was really, really important and significant in shaping the identity and the history of the city. But as I said before, the exact position of Hull brought a lot of challenges as well. Over the centuries, because of this very maritime and very dynamic setting, having two rivers and the North Sea, which we know is quite difficult as a type of sea, we have very frequent flooding that we know from very early on, and it's seen even from the 13th and 14th century in historical documents. And the flooding is fluvial, so river inundation, but also we have a lot of pluvial flooding, which is from the rainfall, as well as occasional tidal surges that come from the North Sea and rise basically the tide of the Humber estuary quite a lot, which then floods the city. And I have here some examples from the Holderness Peninsula and some flooding that happened in the 17th century. And as you can see, because of the River Hull, we don't have just Hull and Drypool, which is right over here, flooding. We have also places higher up along the River Hull flooding, because it's a really flat area. So the river could flood in other further inland spots as well. And we know about the flooding in the medieval and early modern period, mostly from historical sources, such as various archives from the Sewer Commission of the city and various taxation problems that people and residents of Hull and Drypool were complaining about. But if we come a little bit closer to today, in the late 19th and in the 20th century, we have really good documentation of the flooding incidents from newspapers, and I have here some examples from the Hull Daily Mail. The examples are from the 1912, this one, and then it goes to the 1920s and 30s. But we have this sort of documentation all the way to today, basically, and we can actually track when flooding happened in Hull. And this flooding, along with the maritime activities that I mentioned before, have really shaped the people's experience of the city and of the landscape. Coming to today, in the 21st century, the fishing and maritime industry is not there anymore. In the late 20th century and mostly in the 1970s and 80s, most of the fishing and the trawling collapsed because of various changes that took place. So a lot of the docks were actually closed and abandoned. The Victoria dock that I was showing before became a building development. Some others have retained some maritime settings for various types of shipping, but nothing in the scale that we had in the past. And another important thing that happened in Hull in the 21st century is some really intense flooding incidents, like the floods of 2007. There was also one in 2013 that flooded big parts of the city and did a lot of damage in most houses. So people have also these recent memories of, first of all, the impact of the flooding, but also the loss of the maritime industry and everything that this involved. And just like to illustrate a little bit better why water is so important to people and how also water is very important for the community of Hull, I have this artwork that was actually presented for the 2017 City of Culture in Hull. On the right-hand side, you can see these are all residents of Hull that have been painted in different shades of blue and laid down on the street to make this river of people in Hull for this picture in the exhibition. And on the right-hand side, you can see a work by a Hull-born artist who depicts basically his parents' living room and his parents living in Hull, which is frequently underwater. So as you can see, water has been a really important element of the people's identity. So in our project, which, as I said, had quite a lot of an environmental angle because of the department that we're working at, we wanted to encourage an integrated cultural and environmental awareness by following the suggestion of the UN Sustainable Development Goal Target 11.4. Which I have here, which basically recommends safeguarding simultaneously cultural and natural heritage. And we wanted to do that, though, by generating a community dialogue. We didn't want us to be the ones really leading the data. We wanted the community to be able to generate the data. And therefore, we decided to do a project that would have a community-driven, bottom-up research approach. So we decided that it's a lot better for the purposes of what we want to do, to remove the archaeological and heritage research from the ivory tower of academia and from the hands of the specialists and actually give it to the hands of the people and the community who has been living there. And through that, we were hoping to mostly try to record local knowledge, but also environmental understandings that people have about life in this very dynamic estuarine environment, and especially in the climate change that we are facing right now. And this was inspired very much by another important sustainability and climate change document, the IPCC report from 2022, that was recommending for the climate adaptation of communities, especially communities living by the water in islands or in the coast, to use local and indigenous knowledge. In our case, it's local knowledge. And this is basically the group of understandings and skills that individuals, but also groups of people develop, and they are specific to the place they live in. So we were hoping with this community-driven approach to try to record better that, which is considered intangible heritage in the maritime heritage setting that I will be talking about. So here we go. Through that, we would hope that the communities will have some tools to understand better the watery environments that they live in. And because the data would be generated by them, we felt that it's going to be the best way to actually give them that understanding, because they will be the ones leading to that knowledge. And hopefully, we're hoping to restore the bond that people have had with the watery landscape, but kind of lost in the end of the 20th century because of the collapse of the fishing industry that I mentioned earlier. And all of that follows theoretical frameworks that are quite popular in academia right now, such as the ocean literacy, hydro-citizenship, marine identity, and learning histories, which all talk about using heritage, history, and social sciences, but also artistic approaches to reconnect people with the ocean. But in our case, we expanded to water because we're not just talking about the ocean and the North Sea. We have two very dynamic and important rivers in the city. And because of the direct links that the project has with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Ocean Decade that I mentioned previously, our project is an endorsed activity for the UN Ocean Decade, and we're part also of the Cultural Heritage Framework Program of the Ocean Decade Heritage Network. The methodology that we have been using, as you can see, is very interdisciplinary. The department has specializations from many different fields. For this project, we start from archaeology and heritage, incorporating various methods used in maritime archaeology and ethnography, contemporary archaeology, and public archaeology as well. But then we fill in the research with historical research, geography. We address various sustainability issues, so we use quite a lot of the methodologies of social sciences dealing with sustainability studies, and of course, we try to incorporate the cutting-edge participatory research methods that the university has been working quite a lot in the field of education, with not just creating community engagement, but creating place-based studies that can have an immediate and direct impact to the people. So for our project, we had two stages. The first stage was to carry out some in-person workshops in the city of Hull, which took place actually in July in the Western Library and the Wilberforce House Museum. And during these workshops, we invited participants to bring with them a testimony, which could be an object, a photograph, a story, a family history, a fictional story, anything that would highlight and show their connection to water. And we kept water quite open as a landscape, but also as an element. And so we invited people to come with that. And they actually brought with them quite a lot of testimonies and evidence that they shared in a group, which actually stimulated a lot more discussion, and people started remembering other things that they hadn't thought about for a very long time. So it created quite a lot of data. That we actually, especially in the second workshops, we didn't expect that we would run out of time and hands to actually record all this. And that was the first part of the activity of the workshop. The second activity of the workshop was that we asked the participants to go to an ordnance survey map that we had printed and basically map significant places to them that relate to water. But also places that have been lost and they are not very well identified, and places that could be better preserved. And as you can see in that picture here, they were putting little notes explaining the pins that they were putting in. And in the second stage, after we did the workshops, recorded everything, and started processing all of the data that we collected and analyzed, we created a digital story map that is publicly available. It was actually launched just this week. It still needs some additions, but you can use the QR code or the link if you would like to check it out. And this record is going to be open to everyone, but also it's going to be used for various activities by the Maritime Museum and the Living with Water partnership, and possibly other sectors within the city of Hull. And now I'm just going to go through some examples of what we have been recording in the first map, which is about the testimonies of people and their stories, basically, and objects and landmarks of their relationship with water. A lot of people brought old pictures from where they used to live or where they used to work. And here you can see the old harbor of Hull within the River Hull. And this was submitted by city engineer, retired now, but he had seen all of the changes that happened in the River Hull from the 60s all the way basically to today, and in the 2010s when he retired, because he worked there. He saw how the Victoria Dock was closed up. He was part of the dredging, but also the filling up of the dock, and also he was part of the decision-making to create the tidal barrier. So you can see here that the River Hull, since the 1980s, has a tidal barrier, which is basically a door that drops down and tries to keep the tidal surges mostly out, and so that the River Hull doesn't flood the city. So it was a measure that was taken in the 1980s, but that kind of changed how the silting process of the river happened. And then, of course, with the declining fishing industry and various other maritime activities, we don't have any boats really going up and down the Hull anymore. So what the participant of our workshop provided, this old picture of an active harbor in the Hull, is something that might exist in some archives, but it was really nice to have this sort of personal story of how he used to work there. And these were pictures that he took himself. And as you can see nowadays, the building that was in the picture still stands there, but it's not operational as a warehouse. I think it is or will be converted into flats. But again, the setting and the landscape is quite different. Some other people brought more personal stories. Here you can see the picture of one of our participants when he was a kid, and sees at the shipyard at Hessel, where his dad worked when he was in the Admiralty. And she told us in the workshop all of the stories of how she used to spend time and get on the boats there, and she provided that picture. And that was very interesting because we have heard about the Hessel shipyard, but there's not really a visible site about that, even though it was active for a very long time, for several centuries, and it was quite important because a lot of the Navy ships were repaired or so built there. And so that triggered some field work and research for us to actually go and identify that place and see the condition that it is today. Some younger people brought us, again, some very interesting connections that they have with maritime buildings that they don't identify with because of their history, because they were not alive when the fishing industry was happening. And this picture is from the Lord Line building, which was the company that owned most of the trawlers in St. Andrew's Dock. And today it's abandoned. But for some reason, because of this very unique location that overlooks the River Humber, and you can see from the top also the North Sea, a lot of artists and various communities use it as a hub to hang out and illustrate and have various ideas. And a lot of the people participating in our workshop described of how they can really see and absorb this amazing watery landscape of the Humber from the top of the building. Some other stories had to do with flooding. And this example is from the 1969 flooding in the Chamberlain's Avenue. You can see there is a car over here that is flooded under a railway bridge. And if you can read those letters here, it says "my dad's car." So our participant had kept that from the newspaper because his dad's car was featured in the newspaper. And this is from his scrapbook that he has kept when he was a kid. So his watery connections comes from that, even though he was a maritime captain, but he chose this because of how important flooding has been for their lives. Some of the other heritage we recorded are more recent, and these involved some artworks, such as this puffin sculpture of the headscarf revolutionary called Elsie, which a local artist, Susan Woolhouse, created in, I think, 2022 and 2023. She created that puffin to reflect her whole family history, which is very long. She comes from a very long line of mariners and sailors and fishermen in Hull, and she said that they actually know predecessors all the way to the whaling industry. But her puffin was specifically inspired by her grandma, Elsie, who was the daughter of a mariner and also the wife and mother of various sailors. And she tries to reflect with this puffin the stories of the women who were not at sea, but they were staying behind, and they were trying to deal with all this stress and very big hardship that the mariners' life had, involving not knowing if their husbands or fathers will return back home, when they will return, how they're going to return. And she also has put various elements and various notes on the sculpture, mentioning various hints of her family history, and also she explained of how also her grandma took some kids during the Second World War when everything was bombed and people returned back and they didn't have any family, so she took 2 more kids in their house and brought them up as her own. Because that's what you do, you had to help and support the community. So her maritime and watery connection has to do with this stories of how women lived in this city. And she also links her puffin with her great-granddad, James Hames, who was part of the Russian outrage. That was an incident that happened in 1904 when some ships from the Russian Baltic Fleet actually attacked some of the Hull trawlers. They claimed that it was by accident, but actually some people died. And her great-granddad was the captain of one of the ships, and he was wearing this hat when it happened, and he considered it his lucky mark for surviving. So she told us the story of how he used to put it on top of any new baby in the family as a sign of good luck. So the second map we created, as I explained, was a map of significant heritage. And you can see that we have marked in green the watery heritage that was significant to the participants, places that are currently lost and unidentifiable, but they remember and they would like to remember those, and also places that they think they need better preservation and better accessibility in the city. And some examples that I have here is the Hessel shipyard that I mentioned already, in the Lord Line building, which is marked as significant heritage. You can look, if you go on the website, you can explore all of these pins and dots. But also we have, as red, as a place that is not currently identifiable, the Humber ferry quay. There used to be a ferry that linked the coast of the East Yorkshire with Lincolnshire, and it was going between Hull and New Holland in Lincolnshire from 1825 to 1981, when the Humber Bridge was opened. And again, in the workshops, we had quite a lot of stories of people getting the ferry and having very fond memories of being in the water, crossing in that ferry. But the site, as you can see in the picture, the quay is still preserved, but it's closed off, and there's no really signs or anything telling that story, and apart from a blue plaque on the stone on the building, basically where the ferry offices were. And surprisingly, some other elements of significant watery heritage that we saw had to do with maritime themed, maritime themed fountains that are quite popular in the city, and they have been established mostly since the late 19th century. One example is this mermaid fountain, which was known also as the penny fountain, that was established in the Fletcher's Corner. It's in the city center in the old town. This is, I think, Jameson Street and King Edward Street over here. And this fountain has moved around the city quite a lot. It was first introduced in the zoological gardens in the late 19th century, and that's the picture from there. It then moved to Pearson Park, which is a big park in the avenues, kind of in the center, a little bit further north from the city center. And then it was moved in the 50s to the Fletcher's Corner. But currently, as I was saying before, it's in the Western Library because it was decommissioned at some point in the 2000s, and it moved to the Western Library, where people actually take care of it because there's a community garden around it. So you can see that it already has some decorations, and occasionally in the winter it has a scarf around it. So it has a symbolic meaning for them. And very interestingly, when we started talking about that sculpture in the workshops, a lot of people started describing their memories as kids queuing at the Fletcher's Corner to get their pastries, and throwing pennies in the fountain and looking at the mermaid. And they started discussing the various delicious things that you could buy from there. So the symbolic mermaid actually brought up quite a lot of nostalgic moments and memories that linked also the senses of the participants, not just like the memories. They started thinking of the various tastes and the smells and how the city was at the time. So what do we learn from this community-driven research approach? We realized that through that process of the community-driven heritage research, we can see a very long history of empirical understandings and very personal connections that people have to the watery environments of Hull. And we have both tangible and intangible heritage to prove that. And for us, it has been amazing because all of this have been prompts to do further research and actually look into what the people have been describing. We also saw that most people have very deep emotional bonds with the water. And that's both as a landscape, but also as an element. And we are happy to say that we also realized that the community has a lot of space for further environmental and climate action. And we do think that heritage has been a key part of that because it provides a sense of identity and it provides almost a very good reason of why certain things need to happen and change. So just to conclude, from the project so far, which, as I said, is a work in progress, we recorded a lot of stories of resilience from flooding, from difficult maritime lives, from the war, various financial hardships that people and families have been dealing with. But we also uncover a lot of love for water as a natural element, as a landscape, but also with a heritage that comes with it. And we do think that these are amazing assets for climate and environmental action because it can be the starting point from where various other, sometimes difficult discussion can take place. And the next steps that we have planned for the rest of the project, which is 6 months more to go, is that we will open the digital story map to the public. So we hope to actually create an online submission form where people living in Hull can submit their watery heritage. And we want to see how different that might be from the workshop participants who chose to come to our events. And we will try to be uploading all of this data, as we did from the workshop data, on the digital story map. And we also hope to do an artist collaboration for initiating some more connections to the water and encourage this sort of enthusiasm and love that we saw from the group for water. And finally, towards the end of our project, we hope to create a small policy summary with some recommendations that the City Council could use to upgrade a little bit some significant heritage, protect it possibly better, but also we're hoping to give some advice on how they can utilize heritage and history and this sort of community-based heritage approach for the various sustainability and climate change initiatives that they are doing. So that's it from me. Thank you.